Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. All of you guys have been waiting for someone, and he is here, Chris Chappell from China Uncensored. First of all, hello and welcome to the show, and nice to have you back, Chris.
Great to be back.
So, there's a lot happening in China, and what I want to focus on this discussion on is Xi Jinping.
Uh,
He seems to be in an interesting conundrum, if I may, and there are rumors flying around about him not being able to control certain aspects of the party, the military, and this and that. Overall, let's open the discussion so that we get warmed up as well. What is your impression of what's happening with him today?
that's a very interesting question. Well, one of the things that Xi Jinping has been suffering from for quite some time is just kind of a paralysis within the Chinese government, within the Chinese Communist Party, uh, where he is issuing orders and people aren't following through with them. There's kind of this paralysis that is set in because so many people are terrified. They've seen the anti-corruption campaign he's launched that's targeted so many officials. And there's kind of this fear of doing anything. So nothing gets done. But I recently had an episode come out, I think it was this past Saturday, kind of about the idea that Xi Jinping might be afraid that somebody's trying to assassinate him. And there's some good evidence for that.
Really?
Yeah. So if you look, well, first of all, the question is who would be interested in doing that? And I mean, honestly, there'd be like a lot of people who would be interested in that, but who would actually have the ability? Um,
Ability, yeah.
yeah. So I've covered a lot on the show about the factional infighting within the Chinese Communist Party between Xi Jinping and Jiang Zemin and the Jiang Zemin faction. Now,
Yeah.
Jiang Zemin is dead. Xi Jinping has his third term, kind of a leader for life. So many people think basically he's won. But, there's still a lot of people in the party who don't like him. And basically Jiang Zemin's number two guy, a guy named Zheng Qinghong, although officially retired, still alive, still holds a good amount of authority within the party. There's even recently a story in Nikkei Asia that said that Zheng Qinghong led a group of officials at Beidaihe.
Yeah.
That's a major meeting of the party that happens every year, and it's a beachside resort. Happens in August. That Zheng Qinghong led a group of officials to reprimand Xi Jinping for the failing economy, the rest of the world kind of turning against China. So this is a powerful force that exists within the Chinese Communist Party that would like to not have Xi be in power. So if you want me to keep going with this line, I can talk about like some of the individual actions Xi Jinping has taken to that might
Yeah,
make it
let's
seem.
talk about that. You've got Qinggang, which went off. We spoke about it last time.
Yeah.
Then Li Shangfu. Now, Li Shangfu is not a small guy to be kind of taken out. It's not confirmed as of now, but he's not been seen. And they've had a central committee meeting on, I think, on the 4th of September and another one on the 15th of a high ranking military sort of a thing. And he was missing. And which is also, the Xi Jinping's brother has also been missing. So what's happening there?
Well, I don't want to talk too much about Li Shangfu right now because it is pretty recent,
Yeah.
and I'm still doing some of my own research on it. I'll probably have an episode coming out in maybe a week or two. I mean, it's always challenging to talk about these things because there is a degree of speculation, and I try to minimize as much speculation as possible. But yeah, I mean, we've seen potential purges in the PLA rocket force. Um, in my analysis about Xi Jinping being afraid of assassination, we've seen him kind of missing meetings, darting around to places he's not scheduled to go to, as if he's trying to avoid being where he was scheduled to be. Uh, I think Xi Jinping is definitely not sitting on the throne very comfortably.
That's interesting. We recently see his presence on Twitter and with his
Yes, I
daughter as
saw
well.
that. Yeah,
And
it's one of those things where, like, for years I've told people that China is just North Korea with better PR. And if you look at Xi Jinping's Twitter, it looks like North Korea, like the
yeah,
airbrushed photos of Xi Jinping,
the
him
same
like looking at
stance,
something.
the same standing stance and stuff.
Yeah. It really looks like North Korean propaganda. So Hopefully their PR isn't so good anymore.
I don't know why have they suddenly come on to Twitter, and I kind of tend to believe if something really happens to him, his daughter will tweet out, Save me," sort of a thing, appeal to the world. This is uh, just a wild thought, because why would you, after so many years, come out and put out a presence on Twitter? And she had these flashy photographs of her apartment, her rings, and this and that. And she went, people screenshot, just kept everything. But she's now going around and deleting all that stuff. Why am I so confident it's her? Is because there's certain photographs inside the president's car. So
Oh, wait, are
that's
you saying
difficult.
that Xi Jinping's daughter has a Twitter account?
Yeah, Xi
I
Mingze.
did not hear about that. I know Xi Jinping has some new official
Xi's
propaganda Twitter.
Moments is his account, and then there's another one who's kind of tweeting about his tie. I mean, you can't
Really?
survive in China tweeting about his tie. Yeah,
Xi
it's
Ming.
it's
Yeah.
it's a bit curious to me. Anyways, let's. I want to ask you about, you mentioned about the Bedai Her. This is quite curious. This is quite interesting because he's kind of relegated the relevance of that. The meeting quite a bit. He's brought the relevance down by keeping the elders away and stuff like that. Now, how do you think the sudden reprimand of these guys to Xi Jinping plays out in the course of events amongst the CCP?
Well, I mean, even the reporting on that is questionable. It's hard to
Yeah,
know if there was actually this big reprimand that happened. It could be, it kind of seems unlikely, actually, because Xi Jinping does have a lot of power and a lot of
yeah,
authority. The fact that this got reported could just be this Zheng Qinghong, Jiang Zemin faction putting out a story, and that story being their weapon against Xi Jinping. So it's hard to know like what actually happened. There's also a China analyst who, from his sources, he posted supposedly some bullet points of what happened at the Beidai He meeting, which
mhm,
portray Xi Jinping as if he's like losing it. Like one of the
yeah,
things was that he was
mm,
alone on the beach, singing and reciting poetry, talking about burning down the Chinese Communist Party. Uh, and like it's hard to say if any of this is true. This like propaganda messaging works very, very well. Uh, a case in point, when Xi Jinping came to power, right around that time, I think it was the New York Times, did a big spread about Wen Jiabao, the former premier of China's, his family's big fortune. And Wen Jiabao, was more aligned with Xi Jinping. And at the time, there was this huge thing going on in China called the Bo Xilai scandal. Bo Xilai being the guy that the Jiang Zemin faction wanted to be in charge in 2012 when Xi came into power. And so it seemed like that story kind of got leaked by the opponents of Xi, by the Jiang faction, to throw basically slander Xi and his allies.
that's something which is this is a recent phenomenon that I'm seeing. The information coming out of China is on the rise today. Every small little protest about some bank withdrawal somewhere, or some guy cheating on an apartment somewhere, which is not newsworthy, but it's coming out online.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is? Has the kind of censorship tumbled a little bit, or is there another faction handling that censorship? What's happening here? Are the Chinese people putting out SOS calls? What is it? I mean, I fail to understand that. Although I enjoy the details that come out of there.
Yeah, it's again, it's hard to know entirely what is happening. On one hand, there is more access to the internet, smartphones. It might be that just so much is coming out, Chinese censors just can't physically keep up. Um, but yeah, it's definitely a thing where the party or people in the party or factions in the party have used things on social media as narrative warfare. Another example of potentially Xi Jinping using this in the past was like during a lot of the Bo Xilai thing that was going on, Xi Jinping coming to power. There were times when um, stories about Falun Gong would be uncensored in China, which is
Hmm.
very interesting because that's like a third rail red line issue for the Communist Party. But primarily, the persecution of Falun Gong was something that was started by Jiang Zemin, pushed
Yeah.
forward by his people. Um, in fact, even Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao tried to stop Bo Xilai. We know this from leaked U.S. embassy cases down to Chongqing as sort of like a demotion, specifically because they were saying he was getting sued internationally too much for his role in persecution of Falun Gong. So why were there days when like suddenly this would be uncensored? Some people think it could be Xi Jinping or his allies were trying to get some message out there about the crimes of the Jiang faction as a way to kind of silence them or check them. It's sort of like dirt Xi Jinping has on his political opponents.
So there is a precedence to it. That's what you're trying to say.
Yes.
Of Okay, fair enough. Now, when we see the kind of controls that Xi Jinping is putting across within the society, you have the rise of the 15-minute cities. You have the social credit scores. Funnily speaking, I was quite amused to learn that you can give blood and increase your score. So
That's
that was very
wonderful.
interesting for me. I mean, so you got this stuff coming in. You've got a whole lot of other stuff in terms of personal life controls. We had the stuff starting up from the video games and stuff like that. Today it's on down to your clothing. Although I think it's more of a way for the police to kind of uh, enact their authority on the people when it's needed, to use some silly law and put them inside or whatever it is. What is he trying to do? Is he obviously getting some sort of intelligence from his sources about what's brewing in the public? Has he become scared with the white paper protest because of the size and scale of it?
Sure. All right. I think there are two ways to look at this. One is that we definitely see Xi Jinping pushing a lot of party propaganda, trying to solidify the importance of the Chinese Communist Party and, in particular, his position in the Communist Party. And I'm sure a lot of that is because he understands there is resistance, especially as the economy is getting worse, the international situation is getting worse for China. But you also got to understand the communist system, it's kind of like the Wild West. It's not like this meritocracy where everybody really knows what they're doing. It's There's vague directives from the top of the party. Everyone below that is kind of terrified of losing their jobs or getting, arrested or purged for any number of things. So they're incentivized to just kind of take these vague directives and run with them as far as possible. And so it's not that there's this concerted effort necessarily. It's just individual officials just going nuts. For example, Xi Jinping, it was called a toilet revolution.
Yeah.
Uh, China had, this reputation of having like disgusting, horrible toilets. So Xi Jinping was like, we need to have better toilets. And
Guess
then
who
that
he
just,
copied that from, by the way? I
what
call
was
them
that?
cut copy paste. Guess who he copied that from, by the way? I call them cut copy paste party. So we launched something known as the toilet revolution in India, an
Uh-huh.
equivalent where we wanted to build toilets for our poor people. We built 110 million toilets in 5 years.
That's
They
incredible.
built 10 million in 5 years. And they built some of them a five-star toilet. So guess who he copied that from? Anyway, sorry to
Well,
interrupt you.
so exactly with that, like there was a case of like one area, like instead of like making a bunch of toilets, like apparently happened in India, they just spent like an insane amount of money building a single toilet that had like Wi-Fi and microwaves in there. And like that's a case of where it's not like this is something that anyone really thought about. It's communist systems. You have vague directives and people desperately trying to interpret them in whatever way. I heard some good analysis that a lot of the Belt and Road Initiative is actually that rather than this kind of evil master plan from the Chinese Communist Party.
You know, the interesting thing that I see of Xi Jinping today, and especially his body language within the BRICS meeting where he came out, he was supposed to be the leader of BRICS, at least in his own mind. He wanted to portray it as G7's alternative and stuff like that. I'm sure you guys have also done your, focus onto how he behaved there. What's your analysis of it?
I think it's just becoming more and more clear that BRICS is not going to be China's alternative to anything. Especially, I mean, how are China and India going to work together? That's ludicrous. Yeah.
Um,
Actually, I have a podcast coming out today with Cleo Pascal, and she made a good point that at the G20, India really stepped up to present a sort of, I don't want to use the term New World Order because that has a lot of negative connotations.
hmm.
But what am I trying to say with that? Basically, a way for uh, the Indo-Pacific countries in the Indo-Pacific to work together in a way that does not rely on the Chinese Communist Party. And so, if anything, Xi Jinping goes to BRICS thinking he's going to be the center of things. If anything, it looks like India is headed that way.
I mean, the I don't think our focus is to kind of stage him up, but yeah, that's a happy coincidence. Um, he is, of course, more focused towards his led organizations, and a lot of the murmur which is coming out from the Chinese media that I read is about the factor that he's today a senior leader in the world where people need to come and meet him. I mean, how do you see that sort of a reaction coming in from the Chinese? I'm sure people around the world are reading all this. I mean, it's not just me who's reading this stuff. How do you see people reacting to this kind of stuff? I mean, how many people will tolerate this for a long time?
I think I'll take it this way. So, more and more you see, whether it's Wall Street or a lot of major American media, you see a lot more criticism of Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
There's the scales have fallen off the eyes. People kind of see the Chinese Communist Party for what it is. The thing I am concerned about is a lot of this commentary is specifically targeting Xi Jinping rather than the
CCP.
CCP. Yes, and the important thing that people should keep in mind when they're reading any of this is that all these people who are now criticizing Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party, everything that's happening in China now has been happening for decades, not just under Xi Jinping, but under Hu Jintao, Jiang Zemin, Deng Xiaoping, Mao Zedong. And they weren't criticizing things under Jiang Zemin the way they're criticizing things under Xi Jinping, even though Jiang Zemin started mass organ harvesting of political dissidents in China. But why wasn't he getting the kind of criticism that Xi Jinping is getting? Well, it's because under Jiang Zemin, these people could make money. That's not happening under Xi Jinping. And so that's why they're upset. Not that the Chinese Communist Party is this monstrous aberration that exists in human society. It's because they're not making money anymore. I think that's kind of the height of hypocrisy.
So, what are you saying? The global deep state is conspiring with the CCP to remove Xi Jinping?
I wouldn't go that far. Maybe, I don't know, global deep state. But I definitely notice that it's a lot of people who were making money and are now not making money are suddenly unhappy. Nothing changed in the human rights situation. It's always been horrible. It's just a lot of Westerners are not making the kind of money they used to be making.
How do you think the West is kind of reacting to this whole tumble of Xi Jinping? Because over here in this part of the world, there is a certain, I won't call it nervousness, but there's a certain feeling that he will put across and his reactions will be quite aggressive militarily towards Taiwan, towards India, or towards, I mean, we know what's happening in the Philippine Sea. It's terrible. They blockaded off a bunch of soldiers, this, that. So you can see him getting more and more aggressive as we speak. I think today morning, India time, or today morning, Taiwan time, they reported the largest fleet of aircraft coming close to Taiwan. That's 103 aircraft. That's a lot. How do you think he's going to kind of push across his frustration on the outside world? Because he can only do that much within. What do you think is going to his reaction is going to be?
I definitely think as things get worse for Xi Jinping and the Communist Party, the amount of damage and harm they can do to other countries will only increase. And so there's two sides of that. There's economic and military, which you were talking about. On the economic side, I've been talking about this for years. the less invested companies, countries are in China, the better. Because when the Chinese Communist Party goes down, when the economy finally collapses, which we're seeing really pretty serious signs of a
Yeah.
recession in China. The more in bed you are with China, the more it will hurt you. This is why countries need to decouple from China, so that they are not taken down when the Chinese Communist Party goes down. We saw this with the real estate crisis. So many Western companies were invested in that sector, and they're suffering for it now. This is why you finally see a lot of companies and countries getting out of China. Now, on the military side, I definitely have heard the analysis that as a distraction, Xi Jinping will invade Taiwan or take some other kind of military action. So there are a couple of things that I would say about that. Number one, for any modern military to function, you need joint command. Basically, somebody has to have command over the Navy, the Marine equivalent, the rocket force, et cetera, et cetera. And whoever would control that joint command would become the most powerful person in China. I'm not sure Xi Jinping wants to empower somebody to have the ability to stage a coup against him. So from that perspective, that's a sign that maybe war isn't coming.
Interesting.
However, in the case of Taiwan, it doesn't necessarily need to be an invasion of mainland Taiwan, which could spark a huge war. What Xi might try to do is, Taiwan isn't just the main island of Taiwan. There are many, many other smaller islands, some of which have no civilians on it. In particular, the
Kinmen,
one,
Mitsui, yeah.
the Pratas Islands. So Xi might do something where he, attacks one of the Taiwanese islands in the South China Sea that has just a military installation, but no civilians. Score a victory like that. It's questionable whether they could actually do that, but a lot of that would depend on how much Taiwan wants to reinforce these islands. And the idea is that, like, if it's just this small island that belongs to Taiwan, that no civilians, maybe Japan, the U.S., maybe they wouldn't be so keen on
That's the problem.
throwing their troops down. So this could be a way Xi scores a win without empowering some general to knock him off, and without sparking what could lead to World War III.
That's my problem. That median line that kind of has been drawn out. That's like a giveaway. Okay, you do whatever that side, we don't care, sort of a thing. So he can put across a small flag on that island and say, see, the Taiwan operations has begun. I'm like the godfather of China,
Yeah. And
go
that could
on and
set him
stuff
up
like that.
in a position to be able to successfully blockade Taiwan easier in the future.
In the currently, I think it's possible. In the future, with the base in Philippines, which is coming up in Batane, the Americans are going to be just about 200 odd kilometers, or 200 miles, sorry, from Taiwan. So that's going to be quite a pain in his neck. Let's look at the Russians, as a matter of fact, and the whole Chinese map that came out. Incidentally, I don't know if you know that we created a map of China in India and we put it across. And I mean, we did it on this channel and it went quite viral. It's just, I mean, they're universities in India that's doing studies on it and stuff like that. There have been TV debates, and I believe it's gone inside China because there's been a lot of rhetoric saying that Indian netizens are creating these maps and putting it out and all that. Leaving that aside, how do you see this cartographic warfare? Fair enough, India, Southeast Asia, we know there's a problem. With Russia?
Yeah, that was what was very interesting about the map. I mean, obviously China has been claiming Indian territory for a long time. It's funny that the 9 dash line has become a 10 dash line. But I mean, that still isn't like a huge change from what the previous policy was. But yeah, claiming the Russian territory, the territorial dispute with Russia has kind of always been there in the back burner. Actually, Jiang Zemin sold a bunch of Chinese territory to Russia. Um,
Russia
but yeah, it was interesting to see that come out in
again.
such a way. I don't know why they're doing that unless they feel that with Russia's occupation in Ukraine, they can maybe, take some of Russian land. Maybe that's what's going on behind the scenes. I mean, the big picture is that most of the maps in the world are made in China, and by law they have to produce, correct maps. So, I mean, that's why like you'll buy like some toy globe from Toys R Us or some toy company, and it'll have the 9 dash line on it. It's actually kind of a fun thing. Anytime you see a map, take a look and see if the 9 dash line is on there. If it's made in China, there's a good chance it could be. So the subtle way of just China changing how people think of the world. Like if every map they look at, shows Arunachal Pradesh as part of China, people will think one way. I don't know how ultimately effective that will be, but it's a war on all fronts.
I'm not sure what is he trying to do, because at the end of it, the he has to realize somewhere. Okay, let's leave him on the side for a little bit. I want to talk to you about the CCP, and this is a question I'm kind of struggling with. Okay, what is the CCP survival mechanism? You know, when the you know what hits the fan, it's all over the place. The you know what is all over the walls. There has to be a backup plan. I mean, nobody's that silly that you will be in control of a country with nuclear weapons and this and that and the other, and you'll not have a survival plan. What's the game there? What's the backup plan?
Well, the thing is with communist systems, they really they can't innovate. Their solution to any crisis is always to find an enemy, go create an enemy, struggle against it. And that's
So,
why there was the counter-revolutionaries, there were the intellectuals, Falun Gong, Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kong, Taiwan, United States, you name it. That's why actually this is a great idea. This was something we've had him on the show a few times. Retired U.S. Colonel Grant Newsham. He
hmm,
has this great idea that what countries around the world, like particularly media, need to do is kind of expose all the deep corruption within the top levels of the Chinese Communist Party. Because no matter what the United States or India does to like sanction Chinese businesses or whatever, the CCP can always spin that as, oh, look, these hostile foreign forces trying to attack us. But if there's this overwhelming message of like, well, how come Xi Jinping's family has green cards to such and such country? How come they have all of these expensive real estate all over the world? They can't sell that to the Chinese people because then, especially now with the economy heading to possibly a recession, if Chinese people start hearing the messages like, wait a minute, these guys are really corrupt. Why do they get to have all this money? Why are they having skyscrapers in New York City, all these businesses that we can't have? That would be a very devastating blow to the Chinese Communist Party, which is great because it shows that kind of a strategy shows that we don't have to have a war, a kinetic warfare with China. There's many things that can be done. Use some of the Communist Party's own, unrestricted warfare tactics against it.
that's the whole plan. Create stuff, put it out. Like, okay, there's one Chinese person who's here, Ming Wu. He keeps fighting with all my viewers
Uh,
politely. This is one of the politer ones I've seen who doesn't abuse, at least. Uh, there are many more on the timeline that go on, but tolerable. Uh, Having said that, see, the main thing that I see today in China, and please, I'd really request you to chop my head off if I'm wrong, because I'm like a novice right now. What I see in China is a sense of discontent within the people, right? Which is the same discontent that brewed up during the COVID pandemic. Uh, the Chinese, as characteristically, are very calm people. They're not, they don't get Like North Indians, we're very aggressive. So something goes wrong, people are right there to punch it out. Uh, so Chinese are a little more mellow than that. They don't want to get into physical this thing and stuff like that, and they also know that the surveillance state is after them. How do you think this is going to go forward? Because at the end of it, what we are seeing in China is a setup which is going to constrain people even further, remove their money, remove their properties, which is as it is going to go down. They're not going to have people going forward. So the work practices are going to go higher. I mean, the work demands are going to go higher if the economy improves. If it doesn't, you got another problem on your hand. How do you think the people are going to react to all this stuff? Because this is the curious thing. I understand they've got problems. I understand Xi Jinping. I understand the military. I understand the CCP. The un the unknown factor is the people.
That's a great question. This will probably have to be time-wise my last question of the day. But this is why I was talking about how the Chinese Communist Party has always operated by targeting a group, making that group the enemy, the class enemy, and dojang, struggle against them.
Yeah.
That has always kind of been the policy, and particularly in the 90s, the sort of Faustian bargain the Communist Party made with the Chinese society at whole was uh, don't call for political reforms. We'll give you an opportunity to make money. What changed was zero COVID. That was a situation where the Communist Party basically tried to struggle against a virus, which you can't do. And so they were targeting all levels of society. It wasn't a single group of people being targeted. This was, the upper middle class of Shanghai that were suddenly suffering from the Chinese Communist Party's authoritarian rule, people starving in their apartments. This was a case where the Communist Party went after everyone in Chinese society, which is a mistake. There was no longer this group is the enemy. Everyone was suffering. And so, the Communist Party is always ruled by fear. People were always afraid of, saying anything critical about the party because you didn't know who would turn you in, who would rat you out. But because zero COVID was so overbearing and targeted everyone, you saw this outpouring of discontent where finally people in China and even Chinese people around the world were realizing, oh, wait, I'm not the only one who has some grievances with the Chinese Communist Party. Everyone kind of does. And that was a devastating moment to the Communist Party's control, where sort of the wool was pulled back and individual Chinese people realized they weren't just individuals. They were part of a growing movement of all Chinese people who have these grievances. And I don't think the Communist Party is going to be able to put that genie back in the bottle, especially as the economic situation gets worse in China. Again, that will be all levels of society suffering, not just, not Falun Gong or not the Uyghurs. This is going to be everybody. And that agreement the party made about we'll be in charge. Don't question that, but we'll run things well and you can make money. That's going to fall out the window. And that's why I always say I think what will actually change China, will actually topple the Chinese Communist Party, will be the Chinese people themselves. And the rest of the world just has to be there to offer support and maybe stop giving the Communist Party money and technology and DNA sequencers so they can harvest organs from people.
Interesting. If I may just request you, we'll take one or two questions from the audience. There's about close to 900 people with us.
Oh, wow,
Just
great.
quick,
Yeah, sure, I can take it.
yeah. Jackie, Singh, Kishore, and Priyanka ji, please, thank you so much for becoming a member. Let me take the first question. What might become of the communists after Xi Jinping's fall? CCP has been cancelled and pulled out by Xi Jinping. So after the fall of Xi Jinping, will it go back to the 1932 China?
That's a very good question. It's all speculation right now, but
Yeah, of
one of the
course. I
things I am
mean,
concerned about this is particularly why I'm concerned about that anti-Xi, not anti-CCP message I was talking about earlier. The idea that, yeah, if we just get rid of Xi Jinping, things will get better. And then you'd have a situation where the Communist Party is still in power and it's the same exact thing. Or You get rid of Xi Jinping, and then somebody like Zhang Jinghong or somebody in the Jiang faction uh, creates essentially a quote unquote new government that is the same people in power. So just a different guise for the same old corruption.
Survival mode.
Yeah. 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 That's one option that could happen. Um, it could be like I'm not sure the Republic of China government in Taiwan is going to come back and reassert authority in mainland China, but you could see China becoming a democracy because whatever the Chinese Communist Party says about China can't be ruled with democracy. Well, you have Chinese people in Taiwan who can do very well with democracy. You have India, which currently has more people than China. They're a democracy. Why can't it work in China? Now, that doesn't mean that it has to necessarily be exact copy of an American
Yeah,
style
of course.
democracy or a
Yeah.
parliamentary system. I've heard a lot of people argue about the existence of a Confucian style democracy, which is an interesting idea, but I'll let them talk about that further.
Define it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I think, Chinese people are bright, very resourceful. And I think the big thing that will have to happen after the fall of the Communist Party is something akin to the Nuremberg trials that happened after Nazi Germany fell. And there needs to be some kind of way for the Chinese people to process all the trauma that they've gone through as a society, especially anyone who survived the Cultural Revolution. Like all of them have something horrible that has happened to them or their family members that they haven't been allowed to talk about. Or survivors of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Lots of trauma that people need to work through and talk about.
Yeah, that's interesting because you also have the Falun Gong guys that are even more recent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
So much trauma
yeah.
from the Communist Party.
What is Anil asked? What is the credibility of China, where every 6 months top ministers and generals disappear?
I would say the Chinese Communist Party has no credibility. To me, that should have been obvious from the beginning. Uh, you are smarter than most Wall Street investors. Definitely better than Larry Fink. Uh, yeah,
Yeah,
they,
well,
they
he's
don't honor any international agreement. They have no credibility.
I think those guys are BlackRock is kind of wrapping up their stuff in China, right?
Even they are finally like,
Yeah.
okay, this isn't working.
All right, this is an interesting one. The last one we'll take. There's a prophecy in China that the Red Dynasty will come to an end when a golden arrow man destroys the white head crown. Now, Xi Jinping is the white feathered head, or something like that. It translates into that. Like that, the people are saying that the white man is Xi Jinping, and also Xi Jinping believes. So in India, normally, a lot of people have started writing Xi Jinping like that, or people have started calling him 11 Jinping. So it's just a joke that goes around.
Uh, yeah, so I've heard periodically over the years that Xi Jinping is kind of a very superstitious individual. And I've heard a little bit about this prophecy. And, I can't say for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if he hears about this and is, with his delusions of grandeur, might think he might be about him. I heard some of the Rocket Force stuff. Like there was some program that was called like the Golden Arrow or
Hmm.
something kind of tied to this prophecy, and that might be why Xi Jinping started doing some purges of it. I mean, I think it's a very interesting idea to think of. You think of these strongman dictators as being like these super powerful evil people, but the idea of Xi Jinping just trembling because of some prophecy. I think that's actually probably what most dictators are like, very shallow, petty, weak
Yeah,
men.
very
I'll
weak men who are, yeah, who are very psychotic. I think
Yeah.
they get nervous about any small event or any small happening around in the place, and that's something very interesting. Uh, okay, people are noticing the Winnie the Pooh figure behind your this thing, so there are loads of comments about that.
Great.
Guys, thank you so much, all of you guys. This is pretty late in India. Normally, I don't do shows till this late. Simran, thank you so much for your super sticker, and Mind Waves, thank you so much for your super sticker. Uh, there are tons and tons of comments. I'm sure you can actually go through them. There's a lot of people, a lot of very happy to see you here because they follow you on that channel, and I've been trying to do my little bit within India. I speak about China in Hindi so that I can reach a larger audience within India, and try and tell them that China is not this 10 feet tall monster that everybody tells us it is. It is probably, you know, very short and not very this thing. And it's always a pleasure talking to you, Chris, and actually watching you on your channel. I'm looking forward for that podcast with Cleo. Um, I've not been able to get in touch with her. Incidentally, as we were talking, I just got a message from her that let's plan something next week. So when I do talk to her, I'm going to fix it up with her and then connect with you because you've been kind enough and been very nice that you connect with me faster than I can get a hold of her.
Ah,
So we'll plan this podcast sometime, and I'd really like both of you guys if you can uh, engage the Indian audience as well, because this is going to be a big hub center of, I won't call it anti-China, but containing China work, which is going to happen in the world, and we are
yeah.
like bang on in front of China. So, by the way, do you know we sanctioned China just yesterday again?
I didn't see that. No.
Yeah, so we've cut off all steel imports. There's a
Mm,
five-year windfall tax. And so yeah, that's, I mean, they were dumping steel, so we banned it.
yep. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the
So
U.S. had to deal with that too. It's great.
yeah,
Yeah, it's always a
and
pleasure
so
to be on. Uh, I had been planning an India trip for the show,
let me
but
know.
that was in 2020, and then COVID happened, and then no
uh,
international travel broke down. But yeah, I
yeah.
definitely want to get to
No,
India.
let's do an event or something like that so that we can get a lot of people in. I can contact a lot of China watchers in. It'll be nice because it'll be good to kind of interact and exchange ideas, because there's a lot which is happening in this part of the world that probably you guys don't know, and there's a lot probably happening on the that side of the world that we guys don't know, because your information sources are two different things. It'll be good to compare notes. In any case, thank you so much, Chris, for joining me, and to all the audience. Before you sign off, you guys know what you need to do. My job is to make the videos. Your job is to promote it. So hit the like button as hard as you can. Don't break your tabs or phones. Just touch it. Thanks so much, guys, and Jai Hind.